Legend has it this ancient spearhead was thrust into the side of Christ during his crucifixion, an act that transformed it into a weapon shrouded in mystery and legend. Its promise of victory is said to have seduced many over the centuries. Coveted by Roman emperors, fought over by medieval kings, stolen by dictators. But how much of this epic story is true? Amid tight security, the ancient spearhead is undergoing the latest scientific testing. Can 21st century science reveal the true story behind the many myths of the Spear of Jesus? The story of the Holy Spear began at the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. According to the Gospel of St. John, a Roman soldier thrust his spear into Jesus' side to verify Jesus was dead. From that moment, the spear became a relic of immense divine power.
Here we have something that actually pierced Christ. It wasn't just associated with Christ, but it actually was invasive. It pierced his body.
Some of history's most powerful leaders, from Rome's first Christian emperors to Charlemagne, to Napoleon and Hitler, have believed in this spear and its prophecy.
Whosoever claims this spear and solves its secrets holds the destiny of the world in his hands, for good or evil.
Today, the spear resides in Vienna. Returned to the Kunsthistorik Museum by US forces after the fall of the Third Reich, it's now part of a collection of some of the most fabulous jewels and relics in all Europe. For the first time in its history, permission has been obtained to conduct a series of forensic tests. Tests that experts hope will reveal the spear's true age and unlock the truth behind the myth. With utmost care, the spear is removed from its protective display cabinet and packed in a specially designed steel carrying case. Its curator, Dr. Franz Kirchweger, then escorts the ancient relic from the museum, flanked by security guards. He is anxious that the spear is loaded quickly to protect it against would-be thieves and the harsh Viennese winter. Temperature has dropped to -10 centigrade. Without fanfare, the priceless relic is hurried through the streets of Vienna en route to an undisclosed location for testing. Is it possible that it's the actual spear that pierced the side of Christ? Might it be a medieval relic? Or could it be a fake? The idea that the spear is a fake springs from events mired in controversy that took place in a bunker in Nuremberg, Germany at the end of World War II. In one account, a lone US officer and his German prisoner undertook a desperate mission. To find the Holy Spear amid hundreds of pieces of looted works of art and priceless antiquities. a relic said to hold the key to victory or defeat. According to this story, Lieutenant Walter Horn of the US 7th Army took possession of the Holy Spear at 2:10 p.m. on the 30th of April 1945. Horn then passed it to General Patton, its new master. Only 90 minutes later, Hitler was dead. But a rival version of events refutes this story. It claims the SS reached Nuremberg first, removed the true spear, and replaced it with a fake. And it was this fake that US forces returned to Vienna in 1946. The spear has arrived at the laboratory for testing.
Have to be careful.
Nervously, curator Dr. Franz Kirchweger hands over his priceless charge. He is dismissive of the many incredible claims made about it, but has agreed to permit scientific testing. The investigation will be led by metallurgist Robert Feather to try and establish the spear's true age.
You're probably going to have to take an average.
An expert in ancient metals, Feather helped date the copper scroll from the Dead Sea Scrolls. For this investigation, he will conduct a series of forensic tests. X-ray fluorescence to determine the relic's structure, microscopic analysis to assess the composition of its parts, and comparative archaeology and forensics to try and date the object. But he begins with a simple inspection.
I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, it really is a wondrous item. You have to gaze at it, the gold sheath on the outside. It's a wonderful piece. Okay.
First, Feather takes a forensic swab of the spear. He hopes that if he can find organic material, he can use it to date the relic.
You take it back for analysis.
Will the swab find a fragment of wood, or even a trace of 2,000-year-old blood? Perhaps even the blood of Jesus. Legend has it that 2,000 years ago, this spear pierced the side of Jesus. For the first time ever, the latest forensic tests will be applied to determine the validity of this claim.
Right, that's all finished.
The first stage of Robert Feather's investigation, swabbing for organic matter, is complete. But the spear's curator remains nervous about the effects of the experiments.
We were only allowed to perform non-destructive testing on the lance. I mean, he was very concerned that we didn't damage it in any way.
Feather hopes that the tests will reveal if the Holy Spear in Vienna really does date back 2,000 years to the crucifixion. The time when the legend of the spear began. The early church named the Roman soldier who pierced Christ's side as Longinus, a man whose failing sight was miraculously cured by the blood of Christ.
Longinus was blind, living in darkness. When he did it, he realized what he'd done, that he had pierced the side of God made man, Christ.
Besides restoring sight to Longinus, Christ's blood turned a crude weapon into a holy relic. And it is said that Longinus carried the spear for the rest of his life. But did Longinus really exist?
The question is this possible? Well, people have pointed out that the name itself sounds awfully like the Greek word lonkos, which means a spear. So Longinus, the spearman, that's appropriate. But actually, Longinus is a perfectly good Latin name.
To this day, Longinus's life and his spear are commemorated in the Vatican in Rome.
Longinus with his spear spearing the side of Christ.
out comes water and blood. That symbolizes the Eucharist. And so Longinus becomes a symbol of the church.
After the death of Longinus, the Holy Spear was passed down among early Christians. Eventually, it was discovered in Egypt. Here, according to legend, it found its way into the hands of another Roman soldier, a man destined to become a saint, St. Maurice. Robert Feather, the expert conducting tests on the spear, is interested in Maurice because he has found his name inscribed on the spear itself. Could this legendary figure really have owned it? St. Maurice is said to have been the first knight, an African who inspired the code of chivalry.
This will be the code which will be important to all knights from here on in. This is the code they will follow. That's why St. Moritz becomes the patron saint of everything that's chivalric. He is a knight par excellence.
Maurice is said to have commanded the Roman Empire's first Christian legion, the Legion of Thebes. In 287 AD, he was ordered by the Emperor Maximian to lead his men to far-off Gaul, modern-day France. His mission? To suppress a barbarian revolt. By the time he arrived, the barbarians were crushed. Surveying the battlefield, Moritz made a tragic discovery. The barbarians weren't pagans, but fellow Christians, recent converts to the new faith. Moritz was racked with guilt and doubt. Reaching the main Roman encampment, he found the Emperor Maximian was present. A pagan, Maximian ordered the amassed legions to pay him homage as a living god. Moritz responded by making a sacred vow. He would serve his emperor loyally, but God must come first. His vow would echo down the centuries, the cornerstone of chivalry.
We have served you faithfully, we have done everything you wanted, but we will not kill fellow Christians, and we are Christians, we will not worship a false god.
Unmoved, Maximian ordered Moritz's execution.
The emperor then orders a decimation, which meant every 10th man in the army was going to be beheaded, and they were.
According to his first biographer, St. Euchorus, Moritz was followed into martyrdom by all 6,000 of his men. Rather than honor a false god, they chose death, a sacrifice rooted in real events.
At least the nucleus of the story is true. Apparently, the leader of a legion and some of his men were executed for being Christian.
Centuries after his death, Moritz was venerated as the patron saint of knights and crusaders. Yet is there any evidence for St. Maurice having owned the spear? Studying photographs from 1970, when the Holy Spear was taken apart for cleaning, Feather discovers that beneath the outer golden sheath is a hidden silver sheath. On it, an inscription.
Lance Sancti Morici Sanctus Mauritius.
The Lance of St. Maurice. Feather suspects the inscription is medieval, not Roman, but suspends judgment until the tests are complete. The photos reveal a host of component parts. To identify these parts, Feather examines the relic beneath an extremely high-powered X-ray, one that can probe deep into the metal of the spearhead.
The X-rays were very, very useful, and no one's done them before, in seeing how the parts inside were put together.
Using the X-rays and photos, Feather commissions a 3D virtual model of the spear to help him unravel its secrets. The most recent addition is almost certainly the protective outer sheath of gold. Beneath it, the silver sheath inscribed with the name of St. Maurice, and another set of additions, the blade-like wings. At some point, the spear was broken, almost certainly from driving a nail into the center of the weapon. This mysterious nail is linked to the next chapter in the spear's mythical story. After the death of Maurice, legend says the spear fell into the hands of Rome's pagan emperors, and in their treasure houses it lay forgotten for a generation until a new claimant appeared. A man who used the holy spear to change the course of history, Constantine the Great.
The reason why Europe is mainly Christian today, Constantine has an enormous amount to do with this.
Constantine grew to manhood in a bitterly divided Roman Empire. Inspired by a vision of Christ, he vowed to reunite the empire under one strong leader, himself, and to replace the empire's many faiths with just one, Christianity.
He moves the religious center of the empire from the old world of the Western gods to embracing a fairly obscure Eastern cult, Christianity.
He sincerely believed in Christianity, but he also understood that Christianity could help save the empire and that it was to his advantage to make men Christians.
Constantine's faith inspired his mother, Helena, to become a Christian. Early in the 3rd century, she journeyed to the Holy Land to seek relics of Christ's life. It's said she returned with pieces of the true cross and nails from the crucifixion. According to legend, she set these nails in Constantine's armor and weapons to make him invulnerable. Was it Helena that embedded a nail in the spear? Intrigued, Feather compares the nail in the spear with a genuine crucifixion nail from the 1st century AD. They seem to be alike in size and shape, a tantalizing resemblance. If Helena did add the nail, her faith was duly rewarded. Armed with the spear, Constantine crushed his rivals, made Rome Christian, and built a magnificent new Christian capital. Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul in Turkey. One legend says he marked the boundary of his new Rome with the holy spear at his side. Could Constantine have used this spear now in Vienna to convert all Rome to Christianity? In the 5th century, the Roman Empire collapsed and Europe plunged into the chaos of the Dark Ages. Three centuries later, the spear fell into the hands of the greatest conqueror of the Middle Ages, a man who longed to recreate the glories of Rome. Charlemagne. On Christmas Day in the year 800, Charlemagne was crowned overlord of a new empire. Embracing nearly a dozen modern-day European nations, it became known as the Holy Roman Empire.
And the Holy Roman Empire was an attempt to recreate the Roman Empire, but later. And more than that, to even be bigger than that, to expand into areas where the original Roman Empire had never been at all.
It was the pinnacle of a life spent in constant war. The culmination of 53 hard-fought campaigns during which, according to later stories, he had held the Holy Spear at his side. Robert Feather seeks physical evidence linking the spear to Charlemagne's era because he thinks the bladed wings may date back to the 8th century. Could Charlemagne have made these additions to a Roman spear? Yes, according to the first written account of the spear. In the 10th century, a bishop called Luitprand of Cremona wrote that Charlemagne's spear was the very weapon once owned by Constantine.
It was natural enough that people like Charlemagne should want to legitimize their rule by harking back to Constantine, the person who had recreated the Roman Empire, and Charlemagne, of course, was in a sense the first Holy Roman Emperor and the heir of Constantine.
Luitprand recorded that the spear became a symbol of Charlemagne's heirs, an enchanted weapon possessed of divine power.
It is a treasure by which God binds the earthly and the celestial to ensure victory over visible and invisible foes.
An icon of redemption for Longinus, of sacrifice under St. Moritz, and of conquest for Constantine, the Holy Spear then became a symbol of the divine right of kings, an emblem of supreme imperial authority. It became part of the Holy Roman crown jewels, brought out during the coronations of Charlemagne's successors. But could it have been these rulers, and not Charlemagne, who added the distinctive wings? To find out, metallurgist Robert Feather visits the British Museum. He consults an expert who shares his interest in the Holy Spear. Professor Mark Hassel is an archaeologist and expert in Roman weaponry. Through comparisons with Roman spears, Feather hopes Hassel can help him in his quest to discover the relic's true age. He's brought with him a specially made replica.
Can I touch it? I'm not going to go off in a puff of smoke or anything. No. Well, I mean, it's not dissimilar in shape to those ones at the back, but of course this is much bigger. I mean, that could be, on the face of it, typically Roman. But the odd thing about your example, of course, is it's got these things, which you said may or may not be an original feature.
But the wings would have been added anyway.
In search of other spearheads with a winged base, Hassel leads Feather to another gallery. But Feather is in for a surprise. To determine the authenticity of the Spear of Jesus, forensic scientist Robert Feather employs the assistance of Mark Hassel, an expert in Roman weaponry.
Seen those before?
Right.
I mean, those are the...
Look like the wing.
Absolutely. But of course, these aren't Roman. And we're now looking at something of the, well, call it the early medieval period. Well, they're terribly similar, aren't they? I mean, but just, being purely objective about it, I would have said that overall shape, I'd be happy with the Roman period. But these wings seem to put it firmly in the early medieval.
Century.
8th or 9th century. So quite where that leaves you, I don't know.
Feather now thinks the spear is a Roman weapon that was modified in the Middle Ages.
It's quite possible that a relic that has long been venerated as a Roman spear, in fact, is a Roman spear. Roman objects are dug up in household renovations, in digging and construction all the time. So that someone in the Middle Ages would have a Roman spear, it's not unlikely at all.
Back in the lab, Feather turns his attention to the golden sheath. The spear's last edition, the museum believes it was attached in the 14th century, when myth and hearsay finally gave way to fact. It all began in the Eastern European city of Prague. Here, in the 14th century, it became the prized possession of Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, father of the Czech nation. Perhaps the most devout of all the spear's owners, Charles was a fanatical relic collector. To house them, he built an impregnable fortress 32 kilometers from Prague, Castle Karlstein. Inside its massive walls lies its greatest secret, a beautiful golden chapel adorned with priceless artworks and precious gems.
On the upper part of the walls, there is the largest collection of Gothic pictures in the whole world. The ceiling represents the universe, and it's decorated with lens of Venetian glass depicting stars. And in the ceiling you can find also a silver moon and a golden sun. So this is the universe.
In a secret chamber behind the altar, the Holy Spear and numerous other relics were kept, safe behind 6 solid meters of wall. And while the spear was kept here, Charles is believed to have added the gold sleeve and its inscription,
Lancea et clavus Domini.
Lance and nail of the Lord. Charles believed the Holy Spear provided a direct connection to the saints in heaven, and that relics would play a part in the Last Judgment.
He believed that during the Last Judgment, when the saints come down, they come to the place where their relics are kept.
After Charles's death, the spear was transformed once more. This time it became the key to riches. The exclusive preserve of kings for more than 5 centuries, the Holy Spear was then exploited for profit. In 1424, it was bought by a wealthy cartel of merchants from the German city of Nuremberg. But they were dangerous times, and getting such a priceless relic to its new owners required a cunning disguise. A fish cart.
When they were close to Nuremberg, they told the wagoner what he had under the fish and was pretty flabbergasted. So it must have been a big entrance and ceremony into the city.
Under the supervision of the wealthy merchants who ran the city, the Holy Spear became the centerpiece of one of the most profitable businesses of the Middle Ages, the relic industry.
Relics were ways of accessing the divine. By having a powerful relic in your city or in your cathedral, you actually had a practical source of power. It was like sort of buying a supergun or buying some extraordinary armament, which gave you more power. So there was a trade of very, very large sums of money were being passed to people that could provide what were believed to be genuine relics.
Still, please.
Can the relic industry provide expert Robert Feather with clues in order to date the spear? On hand are 2 professors who've spent 5 years investigating the Holy Spear's role in medieval Nuremberg, Corinne Schlief and Volker Schier. Their unique research has uncovered incredible security surrounding it and numerous anti-theft devices. Kept in the Church of the Holy Ghost with other priceless relics, the spear was locked in a striking silver chest. It is still preserved today, an exquisite example of medieval craftsmanship. A complex winch system suspended the chest high above the church floor. As a final precaution, 2 choir boys were made to sleep beneath it. The result was as impressive as it was secure. Beneath the shrine, a picture of the sacred contents within.
Onlookers could peer up into the vaulting and they could see 2 angels who were holding the lance itself.
For 364 days of the year, the spear remained out of sight. For 1 day every year, it was removed, the star attraction of a major festival, the Feast of the Holy Lance.
This took place on the 2nd Friday after Easter, and this was, in a way, a kind of another super Easter.
Started by Charles IV a century earlier, the festival became Nuremberg's premier attraction and drew pilgrims from all over the Holy Roman Empire.
Sometimes quite surprising how many people travelled to these great pilgrim centres. Often, if you were poor, it would have been a question of walking at perhaps the rate of a dozen miles a day. So it would have taken months, possibly even a year, to get to the place.
In the city centre, thousands flocked to a specially constructed temporary chapel. Inside it, on the top floor, nobles and clergy solemnly gathered to take part in the display of the relics.
There was a sliver from the manger, for example, a tooth of John the Baptist, an arm bone of St. Anne. The very last of the relics to be displayed was the Holy Lance. It was the culmination.
Pilgrims would have been overwhelmed with awe. These were things which really brought them into contact with the supernatural. These were things that reassured them of the validity of their faith. This was a very serious event in anyone's life.
But the merchants of Nuremberg were less interested in saving people's souls than emptying pockets, because pilgrimage was big business.
Because relics were so important in the late Middle Ages, it was inevitable they'd be abused. We know that a traffic began to develop. See these relics, get to heaven quicker, but there is a fee. And inevitably there were many people who felt this was an abuse.
As attitudes changed, so did Nuremberg's fortunes. Disgusted by the Catholic Church's exploitation of relics, Protestant reformers rejected them wholesale.
And one of the results of the Reformation is the elimination of a whole series of practices and beliefs which kept certain towns and certain churches in business.
A casualty of the Reformation, the scheme to make Nuremberg rich using the Holy Spear backfired. It remained locked in its silver chest and virtually forgotten for the next 300 years.
What will we get from it?
In the lab, Robert Feather has been joined by Professor Manfred Schreiner of Vienna's Academy of Fine Arts. Schreiner operates a highly specialized X-ray fluorescence machine, or XRF.
Surprise gives us the opportunity to visualize the area of analysis.
The XRF analyzes the elements in the spear.
You see that there are several peaks.
And this is the iron peak here?
Yes.
So the iron is at what, about between 6 and 7 kV?
Yes.
The purity of the iron content, for example, will provide a clue to the century during which it was made. The XRF reading for the nail prompts Feather to investigate further using a high-powered binocular microscope. He thinks he's found something exceptional. small fragments of iron different from the rest of the spear.
Unusual.
Until the XRF data is fully processed, he can only guess if the spear is authentic. Europe's conquerors had no such doubts. In 1805, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France, began to close in on the Holy Roman Empire. He wanted its lands and its relics for himself.
And you can understand why someone like Napoleon might want to gain control of it. There's no doubt that this sphere would have been seen by many people as establishing the legitimation of the person who possessed it.
To deny Napoleon the Holy Spear and other priceless relics, the Nurembergers hastily smuggled them out of their city. They eventually arrived in the capital of the Holy Roman Empire, Vienna. Though the spear escaped the clutches of Napoleon, the empire did not. In 1806, the last Holy Roman Emperor abdicated. The Holy Spear remained in Vienna, now capital of Austria, until 1938, when a new conqueror sought to claim it for his own, Adolf Hitler. Nazis were fascinated by the occult and wallowed in spectacles celebrating the myths of the Aryan master race. Like all tyrants, they coveted the trappings of power. So when the Third Reich invaded Austria in 1938, they immediately stole the ancient relics of the Holy Roman Emperors, including the Holy Spear. These priceless relics were returned to their medieval home of Nuremberg. And here, amid great fanfare, they were put on display.
They were guarded by members of the SS in their black uniforms. We know that Hitler saw the insignia regalia. The sole reason for this exhibition seems to have been to bring a continuity between the First Empire and the Third Empire.
Hitler's was the Third Reich, but the First Reich was that Holy Roman Empire. To be able to have possession of the spear that had inspired Charlemagne would have given Hitler an enormous propaganda victory.
But some claim Hitler's bond with the spear went far beyond propaganda, and that 90 minutes after losing the sacred relic to his enemies, he died. Others allege the US found a fake planted by the SS, who kept the real spear for themselves. Among the few people who really know what happened in the tunnels beneath Nuremberg is Felix Rosenthal, a former sergeant in US field intelligence. A gifted linguist, he became a specialist at wiretapping. And while eavesdropping on Nazi prisoners, he uncovered an incredible plot.
Among the prisoners, there was an SS colonel who was locked up together with some other fairly high-ranking people, and he was explaining to them that he would re-establish the Nazi Party 10 years hence, and that he would use as a symbol of the reborn Germany Hitler's body and the crown jewels.
Rosenthal furiously scribbled down the names of the conspirators. Days later, he was visited by an old friend, Lieutenant Walter Horn. Horn had been given just 30 days to find the missing relics.
And I gave that list to Walter and said, all you have to do is follow that list.
Interrogating his way through the names, Horn eventually found himself in war-torn Nuremberg. But the last name on the list didn't tell him anything about the crown jewels or the Holy Spear. So Horn played a cunning trick. He made the man write a confession.
Well, Walter knew that this man was a devout Catholic. You know that Catholics consider perjury a mortal sin. So Walter starts dictating. I, so-and-so name, swear by the Almighty God. And the guy got halfway through the Almighty and put the pen down and turned green. And Walter knew, of course, that he had his pigeon.
Though he located the crown jewels, Horne didn't find the Holy Spear, as many conspiracy theorists claim. Recently unearthed documents show it was found by other Americans, not 90 minutes before Hitler's death, but 2 months after. Nor was the spear found in an SS bunker, as the story suggests.
This was not a secret installation by the SS or the armed forces. This was a depository for works of art to protect them from the air raids in the wake of the Second World War.
Nor is there proof that General Patton ever held the spear. But one question still looms. Is the relic returned to the Kunsthistoric Museum by US forces a Nazi fake? Many stories and legends surround the Spear of Jesus. Could SS officers really have stolen it and replaced it with an identical replica? Robert Feather has finally finished his analysis. Could the spear be a Nazi fake?
It's quite out of the question. It's a genuine article, that I have no doubt. It's too complex, and some of the items, we can be very sure about the date of them, so it's not a fake, that's absolutely certain.
At last, one of the most persistent myths is finally debunked. Using the virtual spear, Feather breaks down his analysis of the relic piece by piece. Was the golden sheath added in the 14th century when the spear was kept by Charles IV in Castle Karlstein?
The golden outer sheath is certainly consistent with a date of the 14th century AD.
How about the silver sheath beneath it? Dedicated to the African knight St. Maurice, it was allegedly inscribed by an 11th century German king called Heinrich.
The inner silver sheath does date to the 11th century AD.
Feather is certain the silver wire also dates to the 11th century. But to his astonishment, the distinctive wings the wire holds in place are much older.
They're clearly not part of the original spear. The composition from X-ray fluorescence indicates that they are probably from a dagger blades of around about the 7th century as well.
But the big question is, how old is the main body of the spear, the blade? Does it date to the crucifixion?
But as we peel off the gold sheath and the silver sheath and we get to the core of the spear, the probability is very strong that it's 7th or 8th century AD.
Refuting centuries of legend, Feather concludes the spear does not date to the time of Christ. But that's not the end of the story. Feather's analysis of the nail set within the spear offers fascinating possibilities. Comparing it with a nail recovered from a 1st century AD crucifixion, he's amazed by the resemblance. Could the Holy Spear contain a nail from the crucifixion?
The likelihood of the nail as being a nail from the crucifixion, I think, is extremely remote. Its state of preservation pretty well excludes that possibility.
But under high magnification, Feather believes he has found something no one else has seen before.
When you look at the side profile, the area where the brass crosses are marked, you can quite clearly see that there is a discontinuity between that part and the base nail underneath it. So something has been added to that nail. Something has been hammered in.
Just what was added to the area marked by the brass crosses, Feather can only speculate.
You still can't rule out the very slim possibility that parts, fragments of a nail that was used in the crucifixion weren't hammered into this nail itself. That is something that we will never know.
The spear continues to cast its spell. Back in Nuremberg, the Festival of the Holy Lance is being recreated for the first time in centuries. Music and song that once blessed thousands of pilgrims rings out once more.
It's a link with an immensely significant event in the past, the crucifixion of Christ. But also it's been possessed by some of the movers and shapers of our history. You can see why that's going to appeal to the imagination of so many people. Here is their opportunity to be involved with the great moments of the past and be part of them.